My name is Evelyn Hart, 38 years old. On paper, people might say I have my life together, a thriving accounting firm in Portland, a neat little home, and a quiet, steady routine that looks enviable from the outside. But if you peel back the layers, if you step into the world I grew up in, you'd see something different. A daughter expected to stay silent, a sister expected to sacrifice, a woman who learned too young that responsibility can feel like a cage. My brother Daniel was the baby of the family, the golden boy whose smallest accomplishments were treated like miracles. If he drew a crooked picture in kindergarten, it went on the fridge for weeks. If he struck out in baseball, my parents cheered anyway and called it character building. Meanwhile, when I came home with perfect grades, the reaction was muted. A distracted nod from Dad, a tired, "good job" from Mom as she stirred a pot of soup. No fridge magnets, no standing ovations, just expectation. "You're older, Evelyn," Mom used to say when Daniel was caught misbehaving. "You should know better." That phrase became the background music of my childhood. It justified why Daniel got the last cookie, why he got away with breaking my birthday gift, why my tears were dismissed while his tantrums were soothed. I wasn't allowed to be messy, needy, or loud. My role was to be the anchor. I played it well, too well. By high school, the gap between us had widened into a canyon. Daniel scraped by academically, yet every time he passed a test, my parents acted like he'd conquered Everest. I graduated with honors, accepted into a top university on a scholarship, and they barely showed up. Dad claimed work was too demanding. Mom said she had a cold. Daniel had baseball practice. I remember scanning the crowd in my cap and gown, surrounded by families carrying flowers and snapping photos, and realizing I was alone. I smiled for the camera of a friend's parent, pretended it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than I could ever admit. That pattern followed me into adulthood like a shadow I couldn't shake. Daniel dropped out of college. My parents called it finding himself. When he crashed his car and needed money, they sent him thousands without hesitation. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs, rented a shoebox apartment, and built my firm from the ground up. I never asked for help, not because I didn't need it, but because I knew the answer already. You're the strong one. You'll figure it out. Strength in their eyes was just another excuse not to care. Even in love, the pattern repeated. I dated a man for years, gave him my time, my patience, my loyalty. When he left, his words cut sharper than he realized. "You're stable, Evelyn, but you're not exciting." He didn't mean to expose the wound at my core, but he did. Stability was my curse, the invisible cloak that made me dependable but forgettable. I remember sitting alone in my kitchen that night, wine glass in hand, whispering to myself, when did I become invisible to the people who were supposed to see me first? And yet, despite the disappointment, I kept showing up. Birthdays, holidays, family dinners, always with a gift, always with a smile, always filling the role of the responsible sister. I cheered Daniel on when he landed jobs, even reworked his resume after one of his many layoffs. I told myself that was what family meant. Forgiving, showing up, swallowing the bitterness so the bond could survive. Then Daniel met Madison. The first time I saw her, she was radiant in a way that made me feel suddenly smaller. Younger than me, perfectly styled, every hair and word in place. She worked in event coordination, or at least that's what she said in vague terms. She gave me a once-over, a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, and I brushed it off as nerves. But something in her expression lingered. It was the look of someone evaluating, measuring, deciding how much space you deserved in the room. When Daniel announced their engagement, I swallowed any reservations. My instinct wasn't jealousy, it was to help. Because after years of being on the outside looking in, maybe this was my chance to matter. They stressed over costs, venues, catering, photography, and I heard myself offering before I even thought it through. Let me handle it. Consider it my wedding gift. Daniel hugged me like he hadn't in years. Madison even cried. My mother praised my generosity. For the first time in decades, I felt like I had stepped into the circle, not just orbited around it. But I should have known better. In my family, generosity isn't celebrated, it's expected. And once you give, you're not thanked. You're forgotten. I didn't realize it then, but the bridge I thought I was building was already smoldering at the edges. The planning began. I signed contracts, paid deposits, made sure my name was on every agreement. caterers, florists, venues. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I'd learned that safety nets mattered. Still, I told myself this wasn't about control. It was about giving Daniel a day he'd never forget. I asked Madison for her vision. Colors, flowers, music. She answered in clipped texts, sending links through Daniel, rarely addressing me directly. I'd chalked it up to stress. She was a bride, after all. Brides are supposed to be particular. One afternoon, Daniel dropped by with flowers. Real flowers, not store-bought. He hugged me tightly. "I don't know how we'll ever repay you," he said. "You don't have to," I replied. And I meant it. All I wanted was to be there, to sit quietly in the back, watch him start his new chapter, and feel, maybe for the first time, like I belonged in the story of my own family. But families have a way of rewriting stories without your consent. I didn't know it yet, but everything I had been building, every olive branch, every check signed, every quiet sacrifice, was about to go up in flames. All it would take was 8 words, spoken casually, coldly, and they would ignite a fire I couldn't put out. 8 words that would strip away decades of silence and force me to decide who I really was, the quiet giver or the woman who finally took back her place. Those words, "You don't belong here." And this time I wasn't going to walk away quietly. We'll follow the outline. Daniel's engagement excitement, Evelyn's first uneasy impressions of Madison, her decision to pay for the wedding, and the subtle foreshadowing of Madison's hidden motives. The night Daniel called to tell me he was engaged, I was standing in my kitchen with the rain tapping against the window. My coffee had gone cold in my hands, but his voice was buzzing with the kind of excitement that made him sound like a kid again. "She said yes," he shouted. "Who, Madison?" I asked, though I already knew. "Of course, Madison," he laughed, and for a moment I almost forgot the weight of our family history. I could hear his joy through the phone, and something in me softened. Whatever I felt about being overlooked, I wanted him to have this. I wanted him to be happy. 2 weeks later, I met her again, this time properly, not the brief encounter at a family dinner. She had chosen the restaurant, modern, upscale, the kind of place where appetizers looked like art pieces and wine came in glasses so wide you feared spilling them. She arrived before Daniel, of course. Madison always seemed to arrive before everyone else, as if being first gave her the advantage. She rose to greet me, perfectly poised, in a cream blazer that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Her handshake was delicate but firm, her smile wide but practiced. "Evelyn," she said, rolling my name off her tongue like it was a brand she didn't quite know how to market. Daniel rushed in minutes later, apologizing, a little breathless. She leaned over and kissed his cheek with a performative softness that made me feel like I was watching a play. Through the meal, she asked me polite questions about my work, my home, my hobbies. But her eyes never lingered. They darted, sharp and calculating, as though she was assessing the angles of the room more than she was listening to my answers. Daniel, on the other hand, was animated. He told me about the proposal in vivid detail, how he'd rented a small rooftop space, how Madison had cried and said it was perfect. I watched him with a fondness I couldn't quite explain. He had always been the dreamer, the one our parents coddled, but beneath his charm was a fragility, and it was hard not to want to protect it, even now. When the check arrived, I instinctively reached for it. Madison didn't protest, didn't even thank me. She just gave a small nod, like it was the natural order of things. And maybe it was. In my family, I was the one who covered gaps, the one who filled silence with generosity. Later that night, Daniel called me again. His tone had shifted, lighter, more vulnerable. "We're freaking out about the wedding budget," he admitted. "Everything's so expensive. Venues, catering, flowers. I just started this job, and Madison's contract work is unstable. We're thinking of scaling it back or postponing." I listened quietly. For once, he sounded like the little brother who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, looking for comfort. And before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. "Let me help. Let me pay for the wedding." He went silent on the other end. Then, in a voice that cracked with disbelief, he asked, "You're serious?" "Completely. Venue, catering, cake, photography. Whatever you two want. Consider it my gift." I could hear his breath catch. "Evelyn, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Make it a day worth remembering. That's all I want." There was a pause, then his voice dropped into something rare, something real. I love you, Ev. It was one of the few times I'd ever heard him say it without being prompted. That alone was worth the offer. Within days, I was in full planning mode. Madison sent me her Pinterest boards, lavish displays of glass ceilings, pastel flowers, sweeping staircases, and shimmering lights. I signed contracts, paid deposits, and spoke with every vendor personally. My lawyer friend advised me to include clauses preventing transfers without my written consent. It seemed like common sense at the time, just practical protection. I wasn't expecting betrayal, but somewhere deep down, maybe I'd learned to prepare for it. Madison, though, never seemed grateful. Our communications were clipped, transactional. When I asked about her preferred flowers, she simply sent a link. When I suggested color palettes, she responded with one-word texts. Fine. Okay. Sure. Always through Daniel, never directly, as if she wanted to keep a distance. One night, Daniel stopped by my apartment carrying lilies. Real ones, not grocery store bouquets. He hugged me tightly. I don't know how we'll ever repay you, he said. You don't have to, I replied, and in that moment, I meant it. All I wanted was to watch my brother walk down the aisle, start his new life, and know I'd helped build it. But even as I said it, a voice inside whispered, You always say that. You always give, and no one asks what you need in return. Still, I shoved that thought away. This time was different. It had to be. The weeks blurred into a stream of fittings, tastings, and vendor calls. Madison always appeared polished, calm, unshakable. But there was something unsettling in her restraint, like a smile rehearsed too many times. Once, at a floral consultation, she stood beside me, flipping through arrangements. Her voice was even, almost cold, when she said, This wedding has to be perfect. Of course, I answered, thinking she was just stressed. But her eyes flicked to me then, sharp, calculating, like she wasn't talking about flowers at all. That night, I couldn't shake the unease. I told myself it was exhaustion, paranoia, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if Madison saw me as an ally or an obstacle. Looking back now, I realize that was the first warning, the first tiny crack in the facade. Because generosity in my family has never been about love, it has always been about expectation. And Madison, though she wore politeness like perfume, carried that expectation with terrifying precision. What I didn't know was that behind her practiced smiles and clipped messages, she was already rewriting my role in her story. She wasn't planning to make me part of their day. She was planning to erase me from it. And the first cut would be silent. The request came on an ordinary afternoon, tucked between spreadsheets and reheated leftovers at my office. Madison's number flashed on my phone, and for once, her tone was sugar-sweet. I wanted to ask you something, she said. I tucked my phone between my shoulder and ear, still holding a fork over my untouched lunch. Of course, what is it? Her pause was deliberate, practiced. I'd love for you to be my maid of honor. For a moment, I froze. Up until then, Madison had been distant, mechanical, even dismissive. And now, suddenly, she wanted me at her side on the most photographed day of her life. That's really kind of you, I managed, suspicion threading through my voice. She laughed lightly. Well, you've done so much already. It just makes sense. Something about the way she said it felt less like an invitation and more like a transaction, but I ignored the unease. I told myself this was inclusion. This was progress. So I said yes. From that moment on, I threw myself into the role. If I was going to stand by her side, I would do it wholeheartedly. I spent nights scrolling through wedding blogs, building spreadsheets for rehearsal schedules, researching florists and hairstylists. When she wavered on colors, I mocked up digital boards with shades of lilac and sage, soft and elegant. I even paid for a professional makeup trial for her and the bridesmaids, slipping the receipt into my desk drawer with the others. But the more effort I poured in, the more invisible I became. Sometimes I'd send her ideas, an elegant centerpiece, a speech draft, a photographer's portfolio, and receive nothing but a flat thanks or a thumbs-up emoji. Other times, I'd discover she had already made decisions without me. I spent 2 hours organizing potential photo shoot poses, only to find she had booked another photographer with a completely different vision. When I asked about it lightly, she smiled and said, "Oh, I didn't want to bother you with the little details." Little details, the very details I had been laboring over for weeks. Daniel wasn't much better. He dodged my calls, took hours to reply to texts with half-hearted excuses. Sorry, things are crazy. Once I dropped by their apartment unannounced with fabric samples. Daniel opened the door, saw me, and hesitated. Just for a second. But hesitation says more than words. Inside, Madison was laughing on a video call. She muted the screen when she noticed me, standing up with a smile too wide, too bright. "Evelyn, you should have told us you were coming," she said. "I didn't think I had to." A quick glance passed between them, subtle but undeniable. For the next 10 minutes, I sat on their couch, pretending not to notice the way the air had thickened. When I left, the silence in my car was louder than anything they'd said. Later that night, I checked the bridesmaids group chat Madison had added me to. My stomach dropped. There were photos of new dresses, blush pink, not the lilac we'd agreed on. Plans for a bridal shower I hadn't even heard of. Threads of chatter that made me realize the decisions were happening without me. I texted Daniel privately. "Hey, just checking. Are we still going with lilac?" The group chat says blush now. The next day, his reply came. "Yeah, Madison changed her mind. Sorry, it all happened quickly." It was then I started to feel it, the door quietly closing behind me while I was still standing in the room. I decided to be direct. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the three of us. Madison immaculate in a white blazer, lipstick sharp as a blade. Daniel fidgeting with his cup lid, looking everywhere but at me. "I feel like I'm stepping on toes," I said carefully. "You two have been distant, and some decisions are happening without me." Madison's smile was polite, but her eyes stayed cold. "Evelyn, we appreciate everything you've done, truly. But wedding planning is stressful, and sometimes things move fast. You don't need to take it personally." "I'm not upset," I replied, forcing calm. "Just confused. I thought we were a team on this." Daniel finally spoke, his voice low. "It's nothing, Ev. You've done more than enough. Don't stress about it." It should have reassured me, but instead it hollowed me out. The way he looked at me, tired, almost impatient, felt like a stranger's gaze. I drove home that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. Something wasn't right, but I told myself I was overthinking. Brides get controlling, grooms tune out, tensions rise before big days. It was normal, or so I tried to believe. A week later, the illusion shattered. I was washing dishes when a notification buzzed on my phone. Instagram. Madison had posted a photo, her and another woman I vaguely recognized from a dress fitting, both holding champagne flutes under a canopy of fairy lights. The caption read, "My maid of honor. Couldn't imagine this day without you." My hands froze, soap dripping down my wrists. I read it once, then again, and again. Each time the words hit harder, carving into me with ruthless clarity. It wasn't me. No call, no message, no explanation, just erased. I scrolled through the comments, each one a fresh sting. "You two are glowing. Perfect choice for maid of honor. Hearts, emojis, congratulations. Not one mention of me. Not a trace that I had ever been part of it." I called Daniel immediately. It rang 4 times before he picked up, his voice casual, as if nothing had happened. "Hey, Ev, everything okay?" "Did you see Madison's post?" My voice cracked despite myself. A pause. "Yeah. Why didn't anyone tell me?" He sighed, heavy, like I was being difficult. "Look, Madison felt like she needed someone closer, like a best friend, not just family." "I was the maid of honor, Daniel. She asked me." "I know, and we appreciate everything you've done," he cut in quickly. "But this is more symbolic for her. You're still invited. You'll have a seat at the ceremony." A seat. That's what I had been reduced to. "You know what I mean," he added. "You're still family." That word, family, rang in my ears like mockery. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, my phone cold in my hand. It wasn't just about the title, it was about being discarded without a word, about being used for my support, my money, my time, and then tossed aside when the spotlight came. And for the first time, I felt something stronger than hurt, anger. When the ache in my chest refused to fade, I drove to my mother's house. I didn't plan it. I just found myself pulling into her driveway, the same driveway I'd walked up 1,000 times before with gifts in hand and hope in my heart. She was in her favorite armchair, flipping through a magazine, glasses perched low on her nose. The TV hummed softly in the background. For a moment, I stood in the doorway like a child again, waiting to be invited into her world. "Mom," I started, my voice catching. She looked up, eyebrows raised, but not alarmed. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" I sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching my hands together. Madison replaced me, as maid of honor, on Instagram. I had to find out with the rest of the world. She sighed and lowered her magazine, but not her guard. Oh, Evelyn, don't make this about you. The words landed like a slap. I'm not. Don't you think it's strange she didn't even tell me? That Daniel didn't? She's under stress. It's her big day, my mother said flatly. Maybe she just needed someone she's known longer. I stared at her, searching for a trace of outrage, a flicker of maternal defense. Nothing. I've paid for everything, Mom. The venue, the catering, the flowers. I've planned every detail. And that was generous of you, she replied, as if she were closing a polite business meeting. But you did it out of love, right? So don't hold it over them. My jaw tightened. I'm not holding it over them. I'm asking why no one thought I deserved the truth. She gave a small, dismissive wave. Sometimes it's best to just let things go. As long as the wedding happens peacefully, that's what matters. Her words stung deeper than Madison's betrayal. Madison was a stranger clawing for control. But my mother, my own mother, was confirming what I'd known all my life. My role wasn't to be seen or valued. It was to give. Quietly, without complaint, without recognition. I nodded slowly, though my throat burned, not because I agreed, but because I knew there was no changing her mind. To her, resistance was drama, pain was weakness, and Evelyn Hart was not allowed to be weak. When I left, I didn't cry, not yet. I drove home in silence, the streetlights blurring as I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I parked in my driveway, sat in the stillness, and let the weight of it press against my chest. Only when the house was dark and I was alone did it hit me, not with sobs, but with a quiet, suffocating ache. It wasn't just that I'd been replaced. It was that no one cared enough to tell me. Not Daniel, not Madison, not even my own mother. I thought about all the times I had covered for them. The birthdays I remembered when no one else did, the casseroles I baked when they were sick, the loans I gave without hesitation. Every sacrifice had been met with silence. Now, when I needed just an ounce of recognition, there was nothing but dismissal. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the neat stack of receipts in my wedding folder. Thousands of dollars. Hours of my time. My signature on every line. And for what? So my mother could tell me not to make it about myself? I pressed my hands against the counter, the marble cool beneath my palms. For years, I had buried the resentment, convincing myself Daniel just needed more attention, that my mother's favoritism wasn't deliberate, that maybe if I kept giving, they'd finally see me. But that night, staring at those papers, I realized something chilling. They didn't want to see me. Not at my graduation. Not in my relationships. Not in my brother's wedding. They wanted me to give until I was invisible. And the truth is, I had played along. I had played it so well that even now, even as I stood there trembling with rage, my first instinct was to wonder if I was overreacting. But the voice inside me, the one I had smothered since childhood, whispered something different. No, Evelyn, you're not overreacting. You've finally woken up. I thought of Madison's polite smile, the way she avoided my eyes, the way Daniel's voice grew clipped when I asked questions, the way my mother dismissed me without hesitation. Pieces clicked into place like a lock turning. I wasn't just excluded, I was being erased. And the strangest thing, beneath the grief, beneath the sting of my mother's indifference, I felt something else stirring. Not sorrow, not confusion, something sharper, anger. The kind of anger that doesn't explode, the kind that waits, the kind that plans. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing outside. The house felt hollow, but my mind was alive, racing through every memory, every slight, every dismissal. I thought of Daniel as a boy, getting away with everything while I was told to know better. I thought of my ex, telling me I was stable but not exciting. I thought of Madison's caption, "Couldn't imagine this day without you." And then I thought, they couldn't imagine it without me? Then maybe they should try. I didn't know how or when, but for the first time, I knew I wouldn't stay quiet. I was done being the invisible sister, the reliable daughter, the forgotten woman. If they wanted me erased, I would show them what true absence looked like. And they wouldn't forget it. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. The name flashing across the screen startled me. Vanessa. We hadn't spoken in months. Life had pulled us in different directions, but she was one of those rare friends you never really lose. Her voice was hesitant but warm. "Evelyn? Hey, I saw Madison's post. A bitter laugh escaped me. Yeah, I was the maid of honor, past tense. There was silence, then the sound of her breath catching. I need to tell you something, and I'm sorry I didn't put it together sooner. I sat up straighter, heart pounding. What do you mean? It's about Madison, her voice dropped. Do you remember when you and Eric broke up? The name landed like a stone in my stomach. Eric. The man I had spent nearly 3 years with, the one I thought I'd build a life with, the one who ended it abruptly with a vague line, I've fallen out of love. I whispered, Of course I remember. Vanessa hesitated. After the breakup, I saw him at a bar. He wasn't alone. He was with a woman. I didn't think much of it back then. But now, seeing Madison's face all over those wedding photos, I'm almost certain it was her. For a moment, the room tilted. My mind scrambled through old memories. Eric's sudden late nights, his phone always face down, the mysterious M flashing on his screen once that he brushed off as a coworker. Are you sure? My voice came out tight, clipped. I'd bet on it, she said. The timing matches. She was working downtown back then, right? And living near his place. I should have told you sooner. I just didn't connect the dots until now. I couldn't move. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the faint traffic outside, it all sounded deafening. She knew, I said finally, almost to myself. What? Madison. She knew who I was when Daniel introduced us. She knew I was Eric's ex. She knew what she'd done. Images flooded my mind. Madison's cold smiles, the way she avoided my gaze, her clipped replies, her sudden sweetness when she asked me to be maid of honor. None of it had been accidental. It was control. She hadn't just excluded me. She had played me. Evelyn, Vanessa whispered, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said quietly. My hand clenched around the phone. You just helped me see clearly. And I meant it, because for the first time since this nightmare began, the fog lifted. This wasn't about wedding stress. This wasn't about symbolism. This wasn't even about Daniel's cowardice. This was deliberate. Madison had smiled in my face, let me fund her fantasy, all while knowing she was the woman who shattered me years ago. My grief burned away, leaving something cleaner, colder. Anger. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that sharpens itself into a blade. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pace the floor or call Daniel to demand answers. Instead, I opened my wedding folder, the neat binder filled with every contract, every receipt, every carefully planned detail of their perfect day. My name stared back at me from each page. Madison thought she had erased me, but she'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't a guest in this wedding. I was its architect. And architects can dismantle what they build. I poured a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, flipping slowly through the contracts. The caterer, the florist, the photographer, the venue, each one signed by me. Each one locked with clauses I had insisted on. My lawyer's voice echoed in my head. It's good to have safeguards. No transfers without your written consent. At the time, it had been simple precaution. Now, it was leverage. I thought of Madison's Instagram caption, "Couldn't imagine this day without you." Maybe she couldn't, but she was about to learn. Because silence, I realized, could be louder than any scream. I would give her what she wanted. I would disappear, but I would take everything with me. The morning after Vanessa's revelation, my phone buzzed with a new message. Madison. Her words were polished, polite, the kind of cruelty wrapped in silk. Hi, Evelyn. After some discussion, Daniel and I have decided to keep the wedding small and intimate. We won't be including extended family or anyone outside the bridal party. We appreciate everything you've done and hope you understand. No call, no conversation, just a text. 15 minutes later, another message arrived. Just to clarify, it's nothing personal. We just want to keep things simple and drama-free. We hope you can respect our decision and not bring unnecessary stress to the day. Drama-free. The irony nearly made me laugh. I stared at the words, thumb hovering above the screen. I didn't send paragraphs. I didn't ask questions. I replied with 5 words. Then I'll play my part. I set the phone down, exhaled slowly, and pulled out the thick wedding folder from my counter. Every page was a record of my generosity. Every signature a reminder of how much I had given. And every clause, every safeguard, a door only I could close. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved without hesitation. First call, the venue. A woman named Heather answered with a cheerful lilt. Good morning, Willow Heights Event Center. This is Heather. How can I help? This is Evelyn Hart, I said evenly. I'm calling about the Mitchell wedding on the 17th. I'd like to cancel the reservation. Oh, she said after a pause, her tone shifting. May I ask why? Change of plans, I replied. As the sole contract holder, please ensure all correspondence goes through me directly. No one else is authorized to make updates. Understood, she said. I'll send confirmation by email within the hour. Click one down. Next, the caterer. Then the florist. The tent rental company. The DJ. Each call was the same. Polite confusion, followed by professional compliance. The contracts were clear. No transfers, no substitutions, no third-party interference without my written approval. And my approval was gone. The photographer sounded surprised, but resigned. The bakery sighed, but confirmed. By mid-afternoon, the fantasy had unraveled into silence. I scribbled notes as I went, crossing off each vendor on a yellow pad. My handwriting stayed calm, controlled, as though I were balancing ledgers at work instead of gutting a wedding. There was no shouting, no trembling hands, no second guessing. Just precision. Every cut I made was deliberate, surgical, and as the list grew shorter, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Because they had tried to erase me. And now I had erased everything. By early evening, it was done. The binder sat closed on the table, every contract terminated, every deposit burned. I leaned back in my chair, wine glass in hand, staring at the stillness of my apartment. It wasn't triumph I felt, not joy. It was clarity. They wanted me out, so I gave them exactly that. Not only was I gone, but so was the wedding they had built on my shoulders. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next day, I woke to silence. Too much silence. Daniel hadn't called. Madison hadn't texted. My mother hadn't stormed into my inbox demanding explanations. I almost laughed at their ignorance. They still didn't know. But they would. Tomorrow, when the venue gates were locked, when the caterer trucks never arrived, when the flowers never bloomed and the music never played, then they would understand. I poured myself another cup of coffee, watching the steam curl upward like a secret. For years, my role had been to hold everything together, to smooth, to forgive, to give. But sometimes the most powerful act isn't holding things up. It's letting them fall. And I was done carrying weight that was never mine. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and deceptively beautiful. Guests flew in, suitcases packed with pressed clothes and wrapped gifts, buzzing with excitement for what they thought would be a flawless celebration. Daniel and Madison had chosen a venue with sprawling gardens and a glass-ceiling reception hall. They had promised magic. What they found instead was silence. Daniel arrived first for a final walkthrough. He pulled up in his car, music blaring, still humming with nerves and anticipation. He expected floral trucks lined along the driveway, staff bustling with chairs and linens, laughter in the air. Instead, the gates were closed, a rusted padlock dangling where ribbons should have hung. A groundskeeper, confused and gruff, met him at the fence. "No wedding here today," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Daniel's smile faltered. "There must be a mistake. This is the Mitchell wedding. Madison and Daniel Mitchell?" The man shrugged. "Canceled days ago. Contract holder pulled out." Panic flared across Daniel's face. He yanked out his phone, dialing the planner. No answer. He called the caterer, the florist, the DJ. One by one, the calls went to voicemail. He drove around to the back entrance, desperate, but the lawn was bare. No tents, no deliveries, no staff. Nothing but empty space and the hollow echo of what should have been. When Madison arrived minutes later, the fury in her voice carried across the parking lot. "What do you mean canceled?" she screamed into her phone, pacing in heels that sank into the gravel. "I don't know," Daniel shouted back, his face pale. "They all said the same thing. Canceled. Gone." The scene spiraled. Guests who had arrived early stood bewildered by their cars, whispering in confusion. Madison's mother was on the phone with the rental company, her face growing redder by the second. The voicemail response was merciless. Reservation nullified per contract terms. It didn't take long for someone to say my name. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Madison's number, Daniel's number, unknown vendors, even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Each call rang out unanswered. Then came the one I had been waiting for. My mother. Her voice tore through the receiver, shrill and panicked. "Evelyn, what did you do?" I stood by the window, sunlight spilling across my living room floor. I let the silence stretch for 3 beats before answering. What do you mean? Don't play games with me, she snapped. Daniel said the wedding is ruined. Everything's been canceled. Were you behind this? I let my breath out slowly, savoring the calm. You should ask the people you defended instead of me. This is your brother's wedding, she shouted. Yes, I said evenly. The one I paid for, the one I was uninvited from. You're overreacting, she hissed. This is Madison's big day. You've made your point. Now fix it. I almost laughed. The audacity. No, I said, voice dropping into steel. I haven't made my point. Not yet. There was a silence so thick it pulsed. I could hear voices in the background. Madison sobbing, Daniel yelling into his phone. They're talking about legal action, my mother said finally, her tone cracking. Daniel's cousin is a lawyer. He said you could be liable for damages. I crossed the room to the counter where my folder sat, contracts neatly stacked. I flipped it open, ran my fingers along the pages, then tapped my laptop. Check your email. What? I sent you something. There was fumbling on the other end. A few moments later, her voice returned, quieter now. These are all in your name. Every last one, I said. Venue, catering, rentals, flowers, music, photography, all of it. You never transferred anything to them? No, why would I? They never asked. And after all, I was still supposed to be involved, wasn't I? Another silence. In the background, Madison's sobs grew louder. Daniel's voice cracked with disbelief. They tried to cut me out of my own investment, I continued, so I withdrew it. My mother sounded smaller than I'd ever heard her. They have nothing now. Guests are flying in. People are expecting. They should have thought of that before they told me I didn't belong. Evelyn, her voice broke into pleading now. This will follow you. People will talk. You'll regret this. I pressed my hand to the window pane, watching cars blur past below. Let them talk. And I hung up. No slam, no dramatics, just a quiet end to a lifetime of silence. I set the phone down gently on the table beside my contracts. The folder remained open, pages glowing in the afternoon sun like a ledger finally balanced. Tomorrow was supposed to be their perfect day. Now it would be the day they learned what happens when you erase the person holding all the strings. Not unless you're ready to watch everything fall. City Hall wasn't built for dreams. It smelled faintly of floor polish and wilted flowers, its walls lined with faded posters about civic duty and jury service. Yet here they were, Daniel and Madison, reduced from glass-ceiling gardens and chandeliers to a cramped government room with folding chairs and a judge in a dated black robe. The guests arrived in muted clusters, confusion etched on their faces. Many had flown in expecting grandeur. They clutched gift bags and wrinkled programs that now felt absurdly out of place. Whispers rose like static. What happened? Why here? I arrived early. I didn't wear black. This wasn't a funeral, though it carried the weight of one. Instead, I chose a navy blue dress. Simple, elegant, nothing to distract. I slipped into the back row, unnoticed by most, and folded my hands in my lap. Silence suited me now. Madison entered first, clinging tightly to Daniel's arm. Her hair was pinned hastily, lipstick smudged at the corners. Her smile was stretched too thin, cracking at the edges. Daniel looked worse, pale, his eyes red-rimmed, shoulders hunched as though the weight of the day was pressing him into the floor. The judge cleared his throat and began the standard script. No music, no procession, just the sterile recitation of vows meant to sound eternal, but landing flat in the echoing room. I sat still, though I felt eyes flicking toward me. Relatives recognized me. Whispers trickled. Is that Evelyn? Wasn't she the one? The truth hovered unspoken in the stale air. Then it happened. In the second row, Aunt Beverly stood. 72, widowed twice, infamous for being banned from bingo night for aggressive honesty. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Is no one going to say anything? The judge froze mid-sentence. All heads turned. Madison stiffened. Daniel flinched. Aunt Beverly folded her arms. You kicked out your sister, the one who paid for everything. She's standing right there. And we're just supposed to sit here and pretend this isn't humiliating? Gasps swept the room. Daniel's face went white. Madison's lips parted, but no words came. I canceled my hip surgery to attend this wedding, Beverly continued, voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I was told it would be at Willow Heights. I bought a new dress, booked a hotel, spent money I didn't have, and now we're in a courthouse because you couldn't treat family with basic decency? Murmurs grew. Uncle Richard nodded. Others whispered agreement. I sat motionless, but inside a pulse of vindication stirred. Madison finally managed, her voice cracking. We didn't mean to. Beverly cut her off. Don't you dare insult our intelligence. You meant every bit of it. Evelyn didn't have to show up today, but she did. And the way you're looking at her right now, like she's the problem, shame on you. Daniel's hands shook. His eyes dropped to his shoes, unable to meet mine. Madison's face drained of color, her carefully built composure crumbling. The judge shifted awkwardly. Shall we proceed? No one answered. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. I could have spoken then, could have twisted the knife, but I didn't. I didn't need to. The silence itself was punishment enough. The ceremony limped forward. Words were spoken, papers signed. No applause, no joy. Just a bureaucratic transaction in a room heavy with disappointment. Outside, as the couple posed stiffly for a photo beneath the gray sky, relatives drifted away, muttering in low voices. The air felt colder, heavier. I slipped out the side entrance, my heels clicking against the damp pavement. I didn't linger. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any speech. And for the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't the golden boy. Everyone had seen the truth. And it had walked out the door in a navy dress, head held high. I hadn't expected anyone to record it. I hadn't even realized a video existed until Monday morning, when a coworker texted me, Girl, you're on TikTok, and it's glorious. The clip was shaky, filmed from the trembling hands of one of the younger cousins, but the audio was clear. Aunt Beverly's voice rang sharp and true across the internet. You kicked out your sister, the one who paid for everything? She's standing right there, and we're just supposed to sit here and pretend this isn't humiliating? The camera panned briefly to Daniel's pale face, Madison's frozen smile, and finally to me, silent in the back row, expression unreadable, eyes steady. By the end of the day, the video had surpassed 250,000 views. By midweek, it was everywhere. Twitter threads, Facebook shares, Instagram reels. Justice for Evelyn trended. City Hall drama. Our sponsor sister. The comments were merciless. Imagine uninviting the person who paid for your wedding. She canceled it? Good. I would have burned it down. The bride looks like she just saw Karma walk in wearing heels. Even family therapists weighed in, dissecting the toxic dynamics. Lawyers stitched the video, explaining how I had every legal right. Financial influencers called it the coldest, quietest revenge and the most deserved. Madison's carefully curated social media collapsed under the weight of fury. Her Instagram, once filled with pastel filters and cheerful captions, was flooded with angry comments. She tried turning off replies, making her account private, even deleting posts, but screenshots spread faster than she could hide. Brands she had courted for collaborations pulled back. Even her bridesmaids began to unfollow, one captioning bluntly, "Can't stand behind this." Daniel didn't fare any better. He was never active online, but his workplace was buzzing. Someone posted the TikTok to Reddit, and by Tuesday, a colleague had printed out a meme from the video and pinned it to the break room bulletin board. He walked into whispers, conversations that died when he entered the room. At lunch, a coworker quipped, "Hey, Dan, if I buy you coffee, will I still be invited next week, or will you uninvite me too?" Yeah. He didn't laugh. By Thursday, he stopped showing up altogether. And me? I stayed silent. I didn't comment, didn't repost, didn't defend myself. I didn't have to. The world had already chosen my side. What surprised me most wasn't the internet's rage. It was my family's shift. Relatives who had stayed neutral for years began to call, text, email. Aunt Jean left a voicemail. "I always thought you were the backbone of this family. I see it now, clearer than ever." Uncle Richard emailed, "If you ever throw your own party, I'll be there, and I'll bring my checkbook." Even my father, stoic and stubborn, called one evening. He didn't apologize, not directly, but his voice was softer than I'd ever heard. "I didn't see it before," he said. "I do now, and I'm sorry you had to be the one to show us." For years, I had been a shadow in my own family. A giver, invisible, expected, but never celebrated. Now, for the first time, my absence had weight. My silence had power. And people finally noticed. I should have felt vindicated. And part of me did. But another part, a quieter part, wondered, why did it take humiliation for them to see me? Why did my worth have to be broadcast to strangers before my own blood acknowledged it? One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, scrolling through the endless storm of comments and reactions. For every stranger praising me, there was still an emptiness I couldn't ignore. Because at the heart of it all, this wasn't about TikTok or hashtags. It was about the years I had spent trying to earn my seat at a table that was never meant for me, and realizing now, maybe for the first time, that I didn't need it anymore. Still, beneath that clarity, something unsettled lingered. Because I knew Daniel, and Daniel wasn't done with me. I hadn't expected anyone to record it. I hadn't even realized a video existed until Monday morning, when a coworker texted me, "Girl, you're on TikTok, and it's glorious." The clip was shaky, filmed from the trembling hands of one of the younger cousins, but the audio was clear. Aunt Beverly's voice rang sharp and true across the internet. "You kicked out your sister, the one who paid for everything. She's standing right there, and we're just supposed to sit here and pretend this isn't humiliating?" The camera panned briefly to Daniel's pale face, Madison's frozen smile, and finally to me, silent in the back row, expression unreadable, eyes steady. By the end of the day, the video had surpassed 250,000 views. By midweek, it was everywhere. Twitter threads, Facebook shares, Instagram reels. Justice for Evelyn trended. City Hall drama. Our sponsor sister. The comments were merciless. Imagine uninviting the person who paid for your wedding. She canceled it? Good. I would have burned it down. The bride looks like she just saw Karma walk in wearing heels. Even family therapists weighed in, dissecting the toxic dynamics. Lawyers stitched the video explaining how I had every legal right. Financial influencers called it the coldest, quietest revenge and the most deserved. Madison's carefully curated social media collapsed under the weight of fury. Her Instagram, once filled with pastel filters and cheerful captions, was flooded with angry comments. She tried turning off replies, making her account private, even deleting posts, but screenshots spread faster than she could hide. Brands she had courted for collaborations pulled back. Even her bridesmaids began to unfollow, one captioning bluntly, "Can't stand behind this." Daniel didn't fare any better. He was never active online, but his workplace was buzzing. Someone posted the TikTok to Reddit, and by Tuesday, a colleague had printed out a meme from the video and pinned it to the break room bulletin board. He walked into whispers, conversations that died when he entered the room. At lunch, a coworker quipped, "Hey Dan, if I buy you coffee, will I still be invited next week, or will you uninvite me too?" He didn't laugh. By Thursday, he stopped showing up altogether. And me? I stayed silent. I didn't comment, didn't repost, didn't defend myself. I didn't have to. The world had already chosen my side. What surprised me most wasn't the internet's rage. It was my family's shift. Relatives who had stayed neutral for years began to call, text, email. Aunt Jean left a voicemail. "I always thought you were the backbone of this family. I see it now, clearer than ever." Uncle Richard emailed, "If you ever throw your own party, I'll be there, and I'll bring my checkbook." Even my father, stoic and stubborn, called one evening. He didn't apologize, not directly, but his voice was softer than I'd ever heard. "I didn't see it before," he said. "I do now, and I'm sorry you had to be the one to show us." For years, I had been a shadow in my own family, a giver, invisible, expected, but never celebrated. Now, for the first time, my absence had weight. My silence had power. And people finally noticed. I should have felt vindicated, and part of me did. But another part, a quieter part, wondered, why did it take humiliation for them to see me? Why did my worth have to be broadcast to strangers before my own blood acknowledged it? One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, scrolling through the endless storm of comments and reactions. For every stranger praising me, there was still an emptiness I couldn't ignore. Because at the heart of it all, this wasn't about TikTok or hashtags. It was about the years I had spent trying to earn my seat at a table that was never meant for me, and realizing now, maybe for the first time, that I didn't need it anymore. Still, beneath that clarity, something unsettled lingered. Because I knew Daniel, and Daniel wasn't done with me.